Hi, Natalie. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Really, really excited for this conversation. I think we've got a lot of ground to cover. So, first question is, Natalie, you believe, some from our prior conversation, you believe that a business can only grow as fast as its founder can. Um, can you take us to a moment when your personal growth directly unlocked that new level of business growth? How that shaped the way you help, other leaders grow through their discomfort? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that's quite a triggering statement to to lots of people, right? Is that your business can only grow as quick as you can. I know it is for me too, because I believe that everything, our external reality is just a kind of manifestation, if you like, of our inner world. So for me, like growth is continuous, and it's something that I not only strive for in myself, but it's something that I advocate for through all my work, and everything I'm doing is to inspire growth in more people. That being said, I'm not perfect and I'm not done. There is no end to this process. So in terms of growth, for me, the whole experience of entrepreneurship has been a growth and learning experience. I wouldn't say there's necessarily one kind of lesson or one moment, but when you reflect, back, whether it's on your day, your week, your month, like introspection is really, really important to me, and it's about learning. So, I always take time to actually, you know, normally daily, right? But if not, throughout the weeks, to make sure I look back and just see almost kind of, okay, what happened and what did I learn? So when we talk about growth and any I guess any pivotal moments. I think big lessons for me that have helped from a business standpoint. I think, when you first start out, you're definitely you're kind of naive, right? And you go out there with all this gusto, and for me, it was almost like trying to build a house without the foundations in place. I went and spent all this money on like big events, and I spent money like on a fancy like recording studio, and like taking like team like breaks. We went to Barcelona and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of went out trying to do all this super super fun stuff, and like, yes, that's great, right? But it's not sustainable. So for me, like, I guess big learning kind of moment, or a big kind of lesson that kind of unlocked growth for me was around, building a business sustainably, and sustainable. In order for anything to be sustainable, you need to have foundations in place. And I don't just mean for your business, I mean for yourself too. So what does that look like, right? That is obviously taking care of yourself from like a, mental, physical, but also financial standpoint. I had this mindset that, oh, I'm the founder, I'll get paid last, and that's it. It's all about serving everybody else. But actually, I learned that money is a form of self care as well, and that really shifted my mindset. But I almost had to learn that the hard way, right? Trying to build this house quickly, and and knowing that it's not sustainable. So for me now, it is around sustainable growth. So yes, there's all these things that you want to do, but you actually have to look at where you are today, not like where you, yes, have an eye on where you want to be, but at the same point, like make sure that you're, I guess, in reality as well, right? Like the reality of the moment. So in terms of growth, I think for me, the big thing is your business growth and your personal growth has to be sustainable. You can't skip the steps. And in order to get to any destination, you need to have the foundations in place. Or I like to think of it as train tracks, right? So you're almost putting down the train tracks. And then once you have those tracks in place, you will get to the destination, but you can't skip that process. So that was a huge learning for me.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, train tracks analogy, and all the foundations are in place when it comes to growth. So you're talking about obviously wealth, finances, and then growth in health, in your relationships, in maybe the more higher meaning to life or spirituality is, yeah. So it's kind of growth in all those areas reflects into your outer world, and you can't kind of skip the steps. You can't have this business that, and you might grow financially, but if you neglect the other areas, it sort of reflects in your outer world in those other areas that eventually, your whole business could, crumble because it's not built on that foundation. Is that kind of what? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's like for anything to grow, right? It does. It needs a steady foundation, and it needs to be sustainable. And as much as you would like it to go quick, and I think this is probably something that most people that have a vision can probably relate to. Everything feels slow because it just feels like, oh my God, this vision is so clear. So for you, it's just like, I want it here now, right? But actually, is as well, it's like enjoying the process. Like I've become so much calmer like in the last 2 years. When I first started, I wanted it all and I wanted it all now, right? And actually, the process of like building the house, like that is that is what it's all about, right? It's about the journey. It's not about like, oh God, I just want to get the roof on, right? Because it's, one day you'll look back and miss these scrappy times. And for me, that's what really grounds me and keeps me calm. Even, you're trying to run and manage and everything, right? But that's what keeps me really calm, is just knowing like one day I'll miss this. Like one day, like I'll miss being able to just, get on the phone and speak to people like, when it's bigger and stuff like that. One day I'll miss all this stuff and it'll be a memory. So it's just really about like having fun. And I think when you kind of, yes, you have your vision and yes, you know where you're going, but like kind of, I guess, releasing the outcome and not being so attached to, oh, I need to be here by this date, or, like, yes, you need milestones, but again, not getting attached to how you're going to get there. For me, like the vision, like I know it's going to happen, but remaining open, because if you don't remain open, you might miss like a side door,
100%. 100%. And I still struggle with that now. It's, I have this vision, and I kind of think of it from, the vision is almost, it's like an expression of your higher self and like the potential that you can achieve. And then, yeah, being open to how that shows up, because the how's not, it's not really any of your business. As long as you find the path in alignment to the internal growth, that then you eventually become that higher self that then attracts those opportunities around you. How it shows up is, it's usually not, I mean, it pretty much never is how you actually expect it when you step by step plan it out.
yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, the why, it's as long as your why is clear, the how doesn't matter, right? Like, and that's for me, the why is central to everything. So you asked in terms of like steps to overcome, obstacles and that growth piece, right? It's like when your why is so big, it's like you find a way to like figure everything else out. Like, people have like fears of being seen. They have like fears of stepping out their comfort zone, like fears of change, fears of just everything, right? But I think when your why is really clear, the rest of it, it just happens, right? Because you know why you're doing it. And I think if you didn't, I don't, well, me personally, I do not know how you could do this if you didn't have a strong why, right? Like you need that. Well, I need that anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and interesting you touched on the fears, that because they're fears that show up when, like I said, you've got that vision, which is the expression of your higher self and everything you can achieve potentially. But to get there in that internal growth, all your fears show up, along that path, and that really is the journey. And that's the journey. It's the hero's journey. It's existed since forever, since stories have existed, and that is the journey of life. It's the journey. It's not the end result. Life is the same. Life isn't about the end result, because that's
Yeah.
death. It's the
Yeah.
journey, right?
Yeah. It's who you become in the process, right? It's who you become in the process. And actually, when we did like a session at one of our clients, the the sales director, I actually, after we did the session, he read out this poem, and I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's called The Dash, right? And it was basically, I mean, I don't know it off by heart, but it basically talks about, like, when we get to the end, right? Like, you've got like a headstone, and it's, the dates when you were born and the date when you die, right? And then it talks about like how you've spent the dash, right, which is your life and the bit in between. And for me, that's really powerful because, we're here for such a short time, like we really, really are. I think that, when you step back and actually realize kind of how this triggering, maybe insignificant we all are, right? It kind of alleviates you. Well, it alleviates me from anything else. It's like, I'm on a rock. Like billions of people in this world, like nobody really cares, right? So for me, that's very empowering. And I think, yes, it is the journey, and you will face fears and you will be pushed out your comfort zone, but that's part of the fun. And hey, like, what's the worst that can happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is, and I've played around with that thought that we're an insignificant drop in this crazy huge universe that you can't even comprehend. The size and ever expanding, and then on the other side, and I don't know like how you kind of have to maybe surrender to like a divine meaning to life rather than it being just the atheistic view. And I didn't mean for this podcast to go down this route. I'll bring it back to another question soon. But yeah, it's like that's the insignificant part, and then there's also like, are you part of that divine as well? That which makes it you incredibly significant. So it's kind of a funny balance between those two things, and I really like that quote by Rumi that's you are not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop. So it kind of brings it back to how significant we are and yet insignificant when you just look at that materialistic that it really makes you think like, just give everything your all and live this life to the max, and it's beautiful.
It's funny that you quote that Rumi quote because when I was doing my coaching diploma and when I was doing my certification, the coaching training school that I went to, that was their quote. Like, they used that Rumi quote, and like actually their um their logo was a drop basically, and how it all ripples out, right? And yeah, I mean, we could go into this like in depth, but I am also a great believer in that, we're all divinely connected. And actually, for me, that is a superpower in business, to actually like understand that and have that, I guess, if you want to call it spiritual, or guess it's faith, or whatever it is, however you describe it. Like, for me, that's a huge like superpower, right? And I don't know. I do think the world is kind of waking up a little bit more to our connectedness, and how we all are, part of something really magical and special. But for me, I think for more business founders, embracing that is really a superpower, because I think a lot of people try to do it a really hard and difficult way. And actually, I believe, and I hope to be a living example, that there is a kind of more aligned way. I'm definitely somebody that talks more to alignment than hustle, right? Yes, you need to work hard, but it's about being in alignment with the opportunities that are right for you, right? And when you're living a life in alignment, it doesn't feel hard, because it just feels natural, right? So whereas I think a lot of people have this belief that if it's not hard, like, I don't deserve it, or it needs to be hard. I don't actually have that belief, right? Like, I just I believe that you need to work in alignment, right? So, and yeah, I could go into all that, like, in so much depth, but yeah, it's about working on the things that light you up. And I always say what lights you up is no accident, right? Like there's a reason. And if you're
Yeah.
energized and you have a pull towards something, there's a reason, and you to trust that rather than think, oh God, I've got to like hustle my way and it's got to be really, really hard. I don't agree.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's take me through a little bit of your journey then, because you've talking about being in alignment, and you've got a marketing background, you've worked for like both in the corporate world and startup world, and then founding TTM Coaching. What does that kind of journey look like? What are some of the big lessons, challenges, experiences along that way, and how's the alignment piece kind of shown up along that journey?
Yeah, that's it. I think all of our lives are kind of, when you look, they say, I mean, this isn't my words, so I'm not going to take this as mine, but they say you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right? And I think that's it. My journey, like you say, I was in large corporations and then startups, because I was in large corporates and, again, I just kind of thought that's what you're meant to do, right? Like, you leave university and you go get a job. And the thing is, looking back now, all these steps have been like so needed and necessary. Like I've needed every single experience, every single job that I had, every single person that I met. I've needed all of them in order to birth TTM into the world and like make it a thing, right? So my background from corporations, I was working in healthcare and employee benefits from a marketing standpoint, also working in an internal creative agency in the US as part of this healthcare employer, which building like tech solutions and helping people engage with their employee benefits. So as you can imagine, like in building TTM, like that experience is all super, super vital in terms of, understanding more around, employees being bombarded actually with communications and how to get them to engage in things that their employers have, I guess, bought or purchased for them. So it's one thing to get employers to buy in. It's another thing to get your employees to engage in these initiatives. So that's all really been really super valuable, has been building tech solutions. So we, in the creative agency, we would build different like learning modules and I guess, microsites, websites, like a lot of interactive kind of experiences for employees to help then, engage them in their employee benefits. So not only is the employee benefits bit beneficial, but also like leading tech teams. I'm not a technical founder, but my partner and other half is, and I have the experience of leading tech teams. So even though I am not a techie myself, I can understand, and I understand the kind of intricacies behind that. So for me, like that's all really vital, as has like I moved into startups because I knew I wanted to build a business, but I didn't know at that point that this was the business. So moving into startups taught me a lot, because after being in corporate for 10 years, you're used to having a legal team, a finance team, like everything took forever and there was a million people to sign it off. So um, I actually remember when I first started working in the startups, I'm like, I don't write copy. Like there's a copywriter that does that. Like, or, what, I can't write T's and C's. Like legal are gonna have to sign it off, and they're just like looking at me. And then so like very quickly I'm like, oh, okay, shit's different when there's five of you, it's very, very different. But that being said, startups probably taught me more. I mean, all these skills are really vital. I think in large corporations, you learn how to build relationships, navigate a large organization. You understand it's more around, I guess, getting buy-in from stakeholders and stakeholder management, project management. Like, yeah, you get the exposure to the big clients, right, as well, and you're able to build those relationships, which is great. In the startup space, it is scrappy as hell. Like you are there is no such thing as that's not my job, and you have to be prepared to do a bit of everything. So I actually worked in a coffee startup here in London, and that for me, I probably never worked harder, right? But I absolutely loved it, and in that I just learned so much. And I think this is a maybe something people can relate to, but in like startup world, you kind of have to, metaphorically and physically speaking, be able to sweep the floor. Like, you are not above anything. So it's, I think going from, I think it's about being a good all-rounder. You need to have a lot of skills, I think, to get things up. I'm not saying you need to be expert in any particular one, but you need to have a lot of skills. And because you need to be able to sell, you need to be able to do marketing, you need to be able to, build client relationships, you need to be okay at like finance and numbers, and all these skills kind of come together. So I guess for me, when I think about the journey, all those skills and every single step has been necessary for me. And even though I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but I do think having a marketing background is really, really important, because marketing is such a huge part in building a business, in terms of understanding your value proposition, understanding your customer profiles. It's in terms of like how you're going to go to market, how you're going to, get out there. So it is such a huge part of building a business. I'm so blessed and thankful that I've had that experience, because it's really, really helped me. I actually don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had that experience. So all that being said, every step along the journey helps. But in terms of the, so that's me talking about the skills, but in terms of like the vision and where all these kind of drops have came from in order to form TTM. In large corporations, I constantly felt like I wanted to give more, and just wanted to give more, learn more. Like, it was all about like innovation. How can we do things better? But I didn't necessarily feel that they kind of wanted that. I didn't feel necessarily like the environment was one where it would uplift and grow people. It was almost like, and this is my experience, so I'm not speaking for everyone, but it almost felt like we like things the way they are, and like we don't actually want this crazy innovation, and like how do we do things better and improvement. It felt very much like, well, this is how we've always done it. And for me, I always felt like there was kind of a lid on my growth as an individual, and the environments that I was in weren't necessarily conducive for growth. It was almost like, no, we want you to kind of stay in your spot. And then it wasn't until I went to the coffee startup, where basically we were all selling, there was 8 stores, we were selling coffee, flat whites, toasties, and all this stuff, right, across all these different stores. And for me, this is, in a startup, they want every drop, right? They get their pound of flesh from you. I actually, yes, I've never worked harder, but I loved it because you were able to innovate. You were able to make things better. You could see directly the change that you were making and the impact you were having on the business, but also the team as well. So it was in here that I was able to see, okay, we're selling the same thing across all the stores, but actually, what is the difference, right? The difference between the high performing stores and the ones that weren't performing so well was the leadership and the environments that they created for their teams. So, and it was all linked, the sales, the staff turnover, it was all linked. So I guess there's just been this common thread, I guess, throughout. It's about the environment that you create for your people, and enabling and creating an environment that they can grow and thrive. So long way of saying, lots of skills, lots of experience, all of it was necessary, but really for me, my passion is creating environments where people feel like they can learn, they can grow, and there's no ceiling.
Yeah, I love that. Well, then tell us a little bit more about, so TTM Coaching now then, because you've been through some iterations of that so far already as well. Like any startup, you find your way, and then when it comes to TTM Coaching now, you're centered on scalable coaching solutions. So that's kind of Tell me more about that and how that fits into the point that you just made there about, because I think it does, it totally fits into what you just said there about creating that environment and the people. And
so with TTM, it's weird, and I think anybody with a vision will know this. It's like you don't know how, but you just know it's your thing and you're meant to do this. And that is a feeling like, even when I was at the coffee startup, I just knew, I knew, you can actually almost feel it inside you. You're like, I need to get this out into the world, right? So and yeah, it has been through iterations, actually, like starting on like my mom's living room floor, like trying to sketch together like what would a product look like, what can we actually offer, what would organizations buy from us, right? And I think it's about testing and learning as you go. So for me, I was actually I believed in coaching, and I was like, oh my God, I love it. And it changed the way I viewed the world. But it was quite, I guess, a validating experience when we went out and got our first client, right? And then you could actually see the impact it was having on them as well. And I was almost kind of shocked. I was like, oh, wow, it's really like making a difference. And then when they became advocates for us, that really, really helped us, I guess, get a bit of momentum. So for me, the I always knew that what I'm meant to do with TTM is bigger than myself. And I always knew it's like scalable, and it needs, like, because impact, when you're one person, like I can only reach so many people. So I can only, coach a certain amount of people. I can only like do as much as I can from terms of like content, in terms of writing. I can only impact like it is limited, right? So I always knew that it's bigger than me, and it's about bringing a team along on this journey, because I believe we're infinitely more powerful together than we are apart. So for me, that's one thing I know I'm good at, is like bringing people together and getting them to, I guess, buy into what I see. So in terms of TTM, the product iteration has and will continue to evolve. We've been learning off client feedback. We've been adding new products based on client feedback. But then, and that will continue, right? That will continue to be a learning piece. But also, in terms of the scalability of the organization, the first year, what we were doing was very, very manual, and we could scale to a certain point, but we realized again that it wasn't scalable in its current format. So this is where now we have been building tech to scale like the delivery of coaching, really. And so kind of repositioning ourselves as more of not, I don't want to say like we're a tech platform, because at the end of the day, like the tech supports the humans rather than it's like, it's definitely human first, but like the tech is supporting them. But for me, or in the last 6 months, it has been around reposition ourselves from, just being seen as a coaching firm, right? Like I always knew the vision was bigger than that, but I guess that's how it was seen to the world. And now it's like, okay, we need to reposition this, and actually, like, we're here to play with the big boys, right? Like we want to make big impact, and we want to have the scalability to do it. So the last 6 months has been around working on the tech, expanding the coach pool, and making sure you've got the processes and infrastructures to actually scale. Because a year ago, going to these big clients, I mean, it's laughable now, right? But we're going to these events and we're telling these companies that have got like 50,000 people, yeah, we could do it. Like we couldn't, right? There's just no way. So it's like trying to go fishing, and then when you catch a big fish, you're like, oh shit, what do I do with this? So for us now, it's been around creating those foundations and a platform that actually is scalable. I'm not saying that won't change either. That will get to a certain point, it will break, we'll have to redo it again. But I guess it's about each step along the journey. So that's where we are.
Yeah, super cool. Where does the coaching piece come from then? From your your journey? You said you were kind of at the coffee startup, and you said you always had this like vision, and it's like a visceral thing that you just know like intuitively, and you got this is what you want to do. Where does the coaching piece come into that?
Yeah, so when I started at the coffee startup, I knew I wanted to build a business, but I didn't know it was coaching at that point. But I guess what happened and what shifted for me during the pandemic, actually. So after coming back from America, where I was for 3.5 years, I came back in 2020, and I found myself, after an amazing experience, back at my mum's house for the first time since I was 17, right? And she said to me, like, oh, just come back, you'll figure it. And I was kind of naive. I was like, didn't realize quite how bad the pandemic was over here, like compared to the US. The US didn't really care that much, right? So, yeah, it came back, and my mom had said, just use the house, you'll get yourself figured out, right? So I was like, yeah, okay. And came back, and I was like, yeah, I'll just apply for a job, it'll be fine. And obviously it was a pandemic, nobody was hiring, it was winter, it was Scotland, it was dark, it was cold, it was wet. And I found myself on my mom's sofa bed, stuck with every single family member pretty much, and a large dog in this 2-bedroom cottage. And I thought, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, I'm literally going to lose my mind. But it was, I think everybody can relate to this. During the pandemic, focusing on everything else outside of me was making me like ill, like in the way that I was so like anxious, and I was really like worried, and I had a panic attack, right? And in that moment, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was actually really, really pivotal for me, because in that time, right, it stopped me focusing on anything else outside of me. It was like, okay, Natalie, well, what can you control? You can't control like when you're going to get a job. You can't control when this pandemic thing is going to be done. Like, but what you can control is you can control your actions, you control your mindset, you can control how you spend your day. So it forced me in that moment, and it was like somebody had turned on a switch, if you like. It's like, well, what can you focus on? So for me, I shifted my focus inward, and it was all about, okay, like, well, what can I control? And I actually realized I could control quite a lot, right? It's like, and I found myself, just feeling really, really grateful for little things that perhaps I would take for granted before. It's like, okay, because I realized I could control what I focus on. Like, yeah, okay, I could be like, oh, I'm back at my mom's house, right? But aren't I so blessed that I've got a mom and a family that I can come stay at, right? So I think for me, that was a big trigger. And I found myself like almost quite literally overnight going from feeling these feelings of frustration and panic and anger and stress, and like to actually feeling so joyous. And I felt I felt amazing. I felt like I was floating, and I was like, oh my goodness, if I could gift this mindset to as many people as possible, like, wouldn't that be incredible? So that is kind of in the back of my mind, right? And then I guess I didn't know it was coaching when I started at the coffee startup, but through, I guess, I believe people are kind of divinely put in our paths. I met a mentor, now friend, and actually who I host my podcast with, a guy named Bill Harvey. And he said to me at the time, he's like, Natalie, like, just speaking to you, I feel like I've known you like for ages, and you make people feel so comfortable, and you ask good questions. Have you ever thought about coaching? And like, he said that, he planted that seed, and then from there it just rolled. I went and explored it. I was like, oh my God, yes, this is the thing I've been searching for. Linked in with everything, from before. So thinking of my past experience in corporations and the environments and how I felt, linked in with everything with the coffee shop and how I saw the difference between the stores. It linked in with my experience during the pandemic of like shifting mindsets. And I'm like, yes, this is it. Like, so for me, coaching is just the vehicle, right? It's like my why isn't coaching. My why is to help shift mindsets, perspectives, and help people, fall in love with growing, right? And coaching is just the vehicle to do it. So for me, being able to get that vehicle to as many people as possible is something that I'm driven by every single day, because that is just like, you don't need to go through a pandemic to shift your mindset. Like, you can like shift your mindset through this introspective work. And for me to be able to escalate that and accelerate that in as many people as possible is what drives me every single day.
I love that. That was a great story. I'm really glad I kind of went back and asked you that question, because yeah, that was awesome. How do
Thanks.
you so coaching became, you know, the thing that sort of the vehicle that made everything make sense with putting your vision together and then starting TTM. So how do you, because you kind of mentioned, you know, we're not just another coaching company. How what's the differentiation piece like? How does that look?
Yeah. So, and this is something we get asked all the time, right? Like, from like a startups like competition standpoint, it is about like differentiation and getting yourself out there. I would say what makes us different, it is the fact that our aspirations and the vision is big, right? Like, we're here to like be scalable and actually, stretch across the organization. And it's not just for like CEOs and executives. Like, really, we want to make coaching accessible to all. So that for me is like, a huge piece, because a lot of people, and everybody is trying to do their bit in the way that they know how, right? And there is a lot of like coaching firms, I know that, and they do great jobs. But I do believe like pulling our resources together and like actually, you know I believe it's being able to bring people along the journey and actually, build a scalable coaching pool, because it's the collective. When you like harness the power of the collective, you are like, it's the coach's depth of experience and expertise. It's the range of expertise that we've got. So if you're in startup, if you're in retail, if you're in like education, whatever the space is, we have coaches that are basically aligned with your area of growth and expertise. So with the scalability and aspiration to coach as many people as possible, we also have the coaches to be able to make that link. But for me, what's really important as we scale is the personalization, because a lot of these coaching platforms like Ezra or Coach Hub, they are quite impersonal, right? In terms of the connection. As you scale, it obviously gets harder, right? So for us, it's like the dedicated account management function is really, really key. So it's not just giving, stats at the end of a month or the end of a year being like, hey, this was your usage. It's actually becoming almost like an extension of their team. So for me, it's closing the loop. If you think like growth is never done and neither is learning. So for me, with your people, right, like the data that we provide just informs like the next steps that you take on your business journey, if you like. So because you're never done, and neither are your team or your organization, right? So for us with our account management, it is like an extension of your team, because we genuinely care and want to be part of that growth. So the aspiration for me is, for employers to kind of not imagine in their world without TTM, because we're almost like a partner, not a vendor.
Yeah. When it comes to the growth, and I know you kind of sort of in a like pre-launch of like version 2.0, or whatever version that is right now. When it comes to growth, what's your biggest challenge right now? What's not working to the level that it could or that it should?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge right now is, because while the vision and aspiration is huge, like obviously we're not there yet. So I think the biggest thing is about differentiating ourselves from, a lot of other small firms, right? And because yes, the vision's there, but as we talked about, you can't skip the steps. So you need to scale up, like, in increments. You can't just go from 10 coaches to 1,000 coaches. It needs to happen in increments. So for me, the differentiation is a huge piece. And also, I guess it's like resources and money, if you like. Obviously, in terms of the tech, like we're doing as much as we can at the moment with that. And is janky, it will be. But again, it's going to evolve. And for us this year, like a key priority to kind of, I guess, overcome that is, working on securing grant funding and also like pitch competitions. We don't want to give away any equity at this stage because we're I would say too early for that. So for us, being able to secure some kind of funding will really, really help with the tech advancements as well, which will help differentiate us and set us apart from the rest of these kind of small coaching firms. So for us, it is around the resources to scale it, and it is, and money, and then the differentiation, but kind of one feeds the other, if you like. So once we're able to secure some money to help with more of the back end development and get this platform to be a bit more robust, that will then help us onboard more coaches to be able to scale and then differentiate against the rest of the market.
Yeah. Interesting model. When it comes to that differentiation piece, starting out like compete in a competitive space, are you being really focused on niche about who you serve? Is that kind of part of it, like the category and niche down, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I guess when we started, we went too broad. So actually, because the aspiration is like crazy huge. It was also, we were focused on education as well because we wanted to get these solutions into like education spaces as well. So that being, with universities and schools, but actually, realizing, look, we are a startup, like we need to focus and get momentum in like an area that actually has money and funding for these things. So we are now focused just like on the business side of things, but when we're talking about niche and specifics for business, so my network is very much in the employee benefit space. And for me and for us, I guess a key priority is getting into organizations that when you kind of get into one, it basically it opens you up to their clients as well. So for us, it is about establishing ourselves in the employee benefit space first so that we can then spread out. So getting into kind of healthcare companies, and then it makes sense, right, that it becomes an addition and to their current packages as well. So for us, we are focused more on that. That being said, I've also got a lot of links to the startup space, as well. So working with founders too. And startup competitions to get kind of coaching to founders so that they can, build coaching cultures from the ground up. So I would say at the moment we're very much focused. It is on corporations and it is on large corporations, but more so in the employee benefit space so that we can scale across their organization and their clients more quickly.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Makes perfect sense. What big trends or upcoming trends or shifts in the coaching industry are you seeing, or do you see as significant opportunities or challenges, for your business?
Yeah. So trends that we're seeing, like in the last 5 years, the number of ICF certified coaches has doubled. And that growth is continued to, or was predicted to continue to rise over the next 5 years into 2030. So more people are searching for meaning and purpose in their work. So we're going to see an increase of people moving into the coaching space, and people really in the last 5-10 years have really switched on to the power of coaching. So we're going to see more coaches, which in the short term is going to mean kind of more of a dilution of messages, and actually it's going to increase competition for individual coaches because there is going to be more people going out there to do their own thing. So we're going to see that, but also we are seeing employers switch on to the power of it, a power of coaching too. So for me, where I see TTM fit in is to be able to be the organization that brings people together, so that actually, we haven't got, 100 different coaches trying to fight for the same bit of work, because actually as well, you know one person can only do so much, right? So, and yes, they can build like their business, and they can build, a handful of clients, but the work that they can deliver is only so much. So for me, I expect to see the trend of coaching, and you're going to see it more on LinkedIn. You're going to see more like coaches like trying to promote themselves. Let's say over the next over the next 5 years. But I do think as well, why, like, organizations are already kind of pricking their ears up with coaching, but I do think specifically in the next 5 years, as change continues to accelerate with, obviously tech and AI, and then also like the different generations in entering the workplace. So I think it's like in the next 5 years, they're expecting Gen Alpha to come in, baby boomers to leave. That is like the aging population. There is a huge, like, huge, vast difference between, the baby boomers and like Gen X and or Gen Z and Alpha. And for me, like, it's all about change. The change is going to become quicker, and you're going to be more prevalent. And I think any company that doesn't adapt, or like employees that don't adapt to change, they're going to get left behind. So I do see that organizations are going to turn to coaching as a solution for that, because communication will need to improve. People will need to shift their mindset and perspective to be okay towards change, because I think all of us have seen, especially since the pandemic, the world is changing rapidly and it's only getting quicker. So perhaps, I think of my parents' generation, they're probably the last generation that could go to a job and be in a job for 25 years, or in a company for 25 years without much or anything drastic changing. Like, I think employees and individuals as a whole need to be okay with change, and they need to be okay, like, because it's going to keep happening. So I think we're going to see over the next 5 years, coaches continue to expand, right? So we're going to see an increase in, I guess, competition among individual coaches. But at the same point, we're also going to see the escalation of like growth, change happening in organizations with different generations, and obviously tech advancements. So I think the two are going to be like actually a perfect
Mm.
met, right? And for TTM to position itself, in there to be the place that coaches can come, to collaborate and access work, but then also for businesses to access, a depth and breadth of different coaches to meet their needs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I see that. I've seen that change over the last few years. Like you kind of mentioned, there is definitely a bigger awareness to the need for coaches. There's definitely a bigger, amount of people going into coaching. So there is that two-sided sort of supply and demand, and I do think there's a bigger shift in global consciousness that brings that kind of need for meaning and the inner work reflecting in the outer world. And I do think there's a huge shift there in
Hmm.
people's awareness. So yeah,
Yeah.
interesting times. And the changes are definitely not slowing down. It's crazy to think, over the
Yeah.
last, yeah, it's crazy
Yeah.
the rapid changes that are happening in the workplace and in just people's lifestyles. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting times.
Yeah, I think, it's change for good, right? Like, and I think what we're seeing on a global scale right now is like, it's almost this, like, I talk about human transformation and human growth as being this imperfect kind of struggle, right? And I feel like what we're seeing on a global scale right now is that imperfect struggle between the old world and the ways of working, and this new world. And I think, why it can feel so dark, right, is almost like we're witnessing this crumbling happening. But for me, like, when things crumble, like, something new is born in its place. And I know that this new, like, I guess, new ways of working, this new way of living is gonna be, I always believe, like, everything that's coming is greater than what's been, right? And so I see that, but I think that crumbling piece is quite hard for a lot of people, to actually, I guess, see the light that is beyond that. So for me, being part to help people, I guess, navigate this giant global crumble that we're currently in, will, I guess that's why we're there, right? Is to help people through that, But yeah, I'm optimistic about the future.
Yeah, likewise. As as TTM coaching looks to the future, what are you most excited about? Is there a project or a milestone that you're sort of aiming for in the not too distant future? But yeah, what are you most excited about?
I think I'm really excited about the journey. I know that sounds so naff, right? But it is, like, I really am. I think for me, I get my energy like off of others and being around others. And so for me, like, building a team and, being able to just be part of something that we're creating and co-creating together. I think for me, I'm really excited about that. And why I'm doing everything. It's this feeling, and there's this feeling inside me, and it's the feeling knowing that you've made like a positive impact and a positive change, and actually, been lucky enough in the last 2 years to feel that on a scale, like a small scale, right? And I remember saying at the time, I'm like, wow, this is just the beginning, right? Like, imagine what this is going to feel like. So for me, I'm excited. Obviously, to work alongside an amazing team and create something magical and special together. But I'm also like really excited to just that feeling of impact for it to spread. And because again, you talked about the Rumi quote. I just believe that, when we make change with one person, the change doesn't just stop there, it ripples out, right? So I'm really excited for the ripple effect that we will create together. So yeah, excited for the journey, excited for the team, the energy, the fun, just the the highs, the lows, the everything in between. And yeah, one day we'll look back and we'll miss it all, right? So yeah.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. I love it. I love everything you just said, and really appreciate this conversation. Where can people find out more about you online, Natalie?
Yeah. So they can find out more about me. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Natalie Johnston, or Instagram. It's Natalie_Johnston_X. It's like XOXO. Gossip girl. So Natalie, but also TTM. You can find out more about TTM on LinkedIn. So we're TTM Coaching, or visit ttmcoaching.com. So we are there. Come speak to us if you're interested.
Amazing. I'll put the links in the description below when this is published. And yeah, again, I really appreciate you coming on. This is a great conversation, and I'll be watching the growth. I'll be watching your growth and the growth of TTM with some great enthusiasm.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah. TTM, by the way, for anyone listening, stands for To the Moon. So that is where we're going with like this business, with growth, and we want to bring everyone there. So get on the rocket ship.
Thanks a lot. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, James.